Okay, last day from the threshold, and it seems like a long time ago since I recorded the meditation from March 16th. So it was yesterday morning, early in the morning, and it's afternoon here in Albuquerque. It's the last afternoon I'll be here, and everyone pretty much has left except for my colleague Troy Richardson is around. We'll have dinner with him later, and a new conference is coming to town. I think it's called the American Association for Applied Anthropology, so who knows, maybe I'll hit one of their sessions. As if I didn't get enough conference in me. So we left off in the, and there's hotel music playing, so hopefully it's not going to be too loud. Some salsa. We left off with Socrates and the discussion of it's going to be kind of hard to get serious with this salsa in the background, but anyway, the sage, the figure of the sage, and I played off of the notion of the sage as a figure from Eastern philosophy, and the word itself, sage, having a double play for me with the German word sage, so saying and sage, the sayer. So, and the question I kind of posed at the end of the meditation was, to what extent, if the dialogue of philosophy is something that emerges among equals, so friends are equals, and if that equality is the basis of greater equality amongst people, which we would call community, then what is the role of the sage? You know, this single person who sort of stands out. I mean, is it a modality that everyone in their singularity inhabits? Probably not, because the sage has not simply a modality, it has a kind of cultural, historical significance, reality to it. You know, it means that someone who has sort of earned the title, if you will, sage. Traditionally, this would just be someone who was much older, and I think it's normally it's a kind of a gendered role, and you know, I suppose that it's usually considered an old man, but and I don't, even though we've encountered a wise woman in the form of Diotima, and that's important. Normally when people say sage, they think of a male figure, so it has that sort of historically sort of gendered inflection, but it doesn't have to be. So I think that's why it's really significant that, you know, Socrates was taught by Diotima, and she could be definitely considered a sage. But that's not the issue of the gender of the sage. Isn't for me my concern. My concern is simply the singularity of the sage vis-a-vis the collectivity of the learning community and the collectivity of equals. So how does a figure that stands out and seems to have a significant position apart from the rest figure into as a participant? So picking it up then with the sage, and my voice is definitely, I have conference voice at this point, so it sounds a little bit scratchy. Lao Tzu tells us that the sage is the one whose being reflects the way of the Tao. The Tao appears in the union of the heaven and earth. As the horizon of beings, they endure with and through the Tao. Heaven is long enduring, and earth continues long. The reason why heaven and earth are able to endure and continue this long is because they do not live of or for themselves. This is how they are able to continue and endure. The sage also endures with and through the Tao, and her bearing is one who already is not yet, one who bears the gift of teachability, who receives the gift in hearing the other. The sage is the one who is held out in learning, and lets learning happen, and in doing so is both reposed in a dignified calm, and estranged from herself. Therefore the sage puts his own person last, and yet is found in the foremost place. He treats his person as if it were foreign to him, and yet that person is preserved. It is not because he has no personal or private end that therefore such ends are realized. Excuse me, Lao Tzu writes that in the form of a question. Is it not because he has no personal or private end that therefore such ends are realized? And that's from the Tao Te Ching, Book 1, Section 7, Line 2. Lao Tzu offers us an insight into the twofold play of the sage. Here we see that the twofold play, a being enduring in and with the other, is a processual condition of the horizon of beings, which endures in the ultimate horizon, the Tao. Beings endure in the Tao, the nameless, enduring, and unchanging. Conceived of as having no name, it is the originator of heaven and earth. Conceived of as having no name, it is the mother of all things. The nameless Tao signifies the ultimate context, which endures and remains unchanged. As ultimate context, the Tao is described by Lao Tzu as appearing to us in the twofold play of nearness and farness. This is the nearness of being, and which is also its oblivion or beyond. To be beyond is to be farther on than, more distant than, beyond the horizon, beyond the confines of the earth, outside the understanding limits of reach, past, beyond human comprehension and beyond endurance, superior to, surpassing, wise above all others, more than, in excess of, over and above. The twofold play can also be described as beings processual unfolding, hidden unhidden, appearing disappearing, revealing concealing. Together we call them the mystery, where the mystery is the deepest, is the gate of all that is subtle and wonderful. That's from the Tao Te Ching, Book 1, Section 1, Line 4. The twofold play is the mystery of being, which we endure in learning. We receive this mystery as the gift of teachability. The essence of this mystery is teaching, which is nothing else than this, letting learning happen. How is it teaching and learning, the lending of teachability, the passing of the cup, conjoined with the nameless, the beyond? The sage, as the exemplar of teaching learning, is fully attuned to the twofold play. The twofold play signifies the twofold moments of teaching and learning. In letting learning happen, the sage receives the saying of the other into the deepest part of herself, but at the same time hears the saying as what is beyond her. The saying is received, but received over the abyss that stands beyond the sage, between the sage and the other. This abyss joins them, yet separates them. It stands between them and beyond them. The ultimate context engulfs them. But as that which stands between them and the unfathomable is an unbridgeable beyond. The saying of the other arrives from this beyond, over this beyond, through this beyond. The sage hears this saying as wholly other. The sage receives this message and responds with silence. The reception of the saying of the other is possible because the sage's hearing occurs in the releasement of the juridical voice and the judging voice. In this repose, the sage's response is silence. Therefore, the sage manages affairs without doing anything and conveys his instructions without the use of speech. This silence is the proper response to that which is received from, over and through beyond, that is outside and surpassing understanding, in excess. The saying is said evocatively, poetically, when it is offered in excess. The saying of the other is received as the overflowing cup. The sage takes from his cup and drinking is unable to speak a word. Everything depends on this alone, that the truth of being come to language and that thinking attain to this language. Perhaps then language requires much less expression than proper silence. The passing and sharing of the cup is the essence of the wandering together, which is depicted as a banquet among friends, a celebration of the living. And that's how it ends. So, first of all, it's definitely better to record these when there's the very phenomena that one is writing about, which is silence. Now, this is an interesting exercise because like when I wrote these originally, there would be, in terms of the scheduling of my day, an opportunity to write only when it arose in the afternoon, perhaps, or later, on the road, wherever, and whenever, so long as it happened within the 24 hours of a day. Since I've been here in Albuquerque, I've been mostly recording these and reading these meditations and recording the commentary in the morning when it's quite, quiet. No hotel music and no, colleagues of mine waving to me. That's what happened. Glenn Hudak, who would have actually been someone that I would have liked to make a comment on this, because Glenn has this keen interest and expertise in Eastern thought, and he combines it with psychoanalysis and his interest in disability studies, particularly autism. So the silence that I've been talking about, Glenn kind of explores that in his work on autism. So it would have been interesting to have Glenn talk about it. He gave a paper where he sort of positively and constructively described phenomenologically the silence that occurs between himself and his son, who has autism. So anyway, that was Glenn, and there were others. So silence was the important phenomena that was discussed, but not necessarily experienced. Although one could say there's always a kind of silence present. I mean, that's the theme that I've been making, just sort of sharing with others all week during the conference, was this idea that these things are always, these ontologies, these fundamental ontologies are always already present. That, and we can. So it's not a matter of their possibly being or not, but they are. And so in one sense we can talk about their presence being absent. So the absence of silence was shown by the sort of clutter of noise and various sounds coming together, which is what I would consider noise. Noise is only when there's a sort of the unharmonious or cacophony of sonic movement, where things are kind of colliding in a way that is definitely unintended. So it's it's like a mashup of things coming from very different angles. So you have the hotel music, talking folks that work here, and then me trying to read. That's noise. Somewhere in the middle there's noise. Now, does noise have meaning to it? Well, it's part of the problem is because you have these folks over here having a conversation amongst together, and then you have the one walking away to talk on the phone. You have the music, which has its own sort of speaker, and it's who knows what it is. It's supposed to be what they call ambient, which is just sort of filling the air with no particular aim other than to be just a sound in the air that's supposed to be, I suppose, pleasing or scene setting or something. At any rate, and then me, who was doing this. So obviously what I've been talking about with the conversation amongst friends is intentional speech that is made towards one another and towards some question, in response to a question, and it's responding to whatever the case may be. It could be the weather, it could be a discussion amongst political rivals, it could be anything that's talked about and talked through. But the point of the meditation really was to emphasize the silence that makes it possible for there to be any talk at all. And I think the silence now is in some ways standing in for the nothing, right? So the nothing is in a way changing as a category. So where it stood as an existential modality of the human, and sort of what one gets turned away from, and toward, rather, what one gets turned toward when one shifts one's attention away from things and towards nothing, and that in that shift one is now perceiving possibility, which is another way of saying freedom. So freedom arises, remember what Heidegger said, without the nothing, no selfhood, no freedom. And then the nothing sort of came to represent the excess of being. So the spilling over of being, what gives us to think, right? So being beyond being is not a beyond being in the sense of that it comes to mean later through Lao Tzu, but it's beyond what's left behind, the excess of being. So the excess of being stood for the nothing, because it stands for what is not yet, and in the sense that it's what we take up to make and to fabricate, and what this is the basis of what I'm calling philosophy. So the nothing, which is the essence of being, provides for philosophy. Something that which is nothing is actually just not something yet, or it could be something. What my colleague Tyson, who interviewed me, which is interesting how that came about, where he ended up interviewing me, he talked about it as pure potentiality. So it just is nothing is pure potentiality. It's the pure possibility of something being. So it's not that it's not yet a chair, or it's not yet a cup. It's just nothing, not yet something, whatever that will be. And then the last way in which the nothing is being used is as the silence that is what makes possible the dialogue. Wow, the wind's really kicking up. It's very dramatic. And this is kind of, I'm finding fascinating, because the power of the wind and the movement of the wind has this filtering effect, right? So it affects the sound waves. So it's creating a kind of not a silence, but something else. So anyway, so the nothing represents the silence, which is this gap that opens up, that allows for the movement of sound. But in the case of language, which is important for this project, language in the widest sense, which is the way we take up the other nothing. So there's these three moments of the nothing. The one where we're turned away towards the nothing, which is in relationship to the human, is possibility and freedom. The nothing that we have an effacement within that moment, which is the nothing of being, which is what's beyond being, or which is not yet something. And then in the taking up of that nothing, or that pure potentiality, we arrive at an encounter with the nothing as the gap, which is the silence, which allows for us to do something, to say something. But saying is not just verbal communication, but it really is a signifier for our making of something, or bringing something into being. There is a fourth sense of the nothing, and the fourth sense of the nothing is actually the nothing that Lao Tzu talks about, which is the Tao that has no name. And that's I don't talk about it here in this meditation. I will come back to it, but that is sort of the ultimate horizon. The nothing is the ultimate horizon. So if you think of space and the universe, and you think of the most extreme ends of the expanding universe, presuming that the universe is expanding, and it's expanding at the speed of light, the expansion can be likened to an expanding bubble, or a balloon rather. And so as a balloon is moving forward, one could say, well, okay, so this fourth nothing is the edges of the balloon, like the surface of the balloon, right? So, and then what's inside the balloon is the universe. However, another way of seeing that, so there's sort of 4A and 4B. 4B would be the oblivion that is open, that allows for the expanding balloon. So if you just think of, going to the circus or going to a fair, and you go to get a balloon for your kid, and they put the helium in the balloon, and it goes and expands. The helium inside the balloon pushes the balloon material outward, but what allows for the balloon to expand is the air that's around the balloon, right, that we're breathing and moving in. So this is why at some point I'll talk about the air, and liken that as well to the nothing. So but in this case of the universe, if you want to think of it in those terms, it's the oblivion, that which is, it truly is outside of existence. So I think that this may be what Lao Tzu is talking about when he talks about the Tao which has no name. Why he would talk about it this way, that remains to be seen. So that's where I'm going to leave it, actually, on this St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2014. And I believe this is PPM33, but this was originally written March the 17th, 2004, 10 years ago on this date.